Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this latest series of TAPAS, Tackling Air Pollution at School seminar series. For those of you who've been here before, we run these seminars on Thursdays at lunchtimes, and this is about our fifth series. And so we're starting off this, I guess, spring summer series today. I'm Paul Linden. I'm the principal investigator of the TAPAS project, which is focused on air pollution in schools. And TAPAS is a network open to anybody who has an interest in air quality in schools. And we very much welcome people to join our network. And at the end of this talk, we'll put up some information about how you can get involved if you haven't already done so through our website and so forth. Anyway, a couple of housekeeping things to say. First of all, this seminar is being recorded. So if you don't wish to be identified, keep your camera off and stay mute. And please don't interrupt the speakers, but when we get to the end or during the course of the talk, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll go over them at the end of the presentation. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to now introduce our speakers. We have two speakers from the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, SEPA, about community engagement and air quality in Stirlingshire villages, which is about a citizen science program in collaboration with Stirling University and Stirling Council around community engagement with Stirlingshire villages. And we have two speakers, Colin Gillespie. He's the air modelling unit manager within SEPA, responsible for Scotland's low emission zones, and has long experience with SEPA and local authorities, and provides advice on low-cost sensor technology and developing teaching programs, and provides classroom-based activities for schools across Scotland. And Graham Applegate is the Principal Policy Officer for Air Quality in SEPA, with a lot of experience again in air quality policy development and environmental regulation. And he's led the Scottish Government's Cleaner Air for Scotland strategies and worked again in the Air Quality Citizens Science Programme. So it's a great pleasure to have these Graham and Colin here to talk to us today and to tell us what we've been doing around their work in Stirling and the surrounding areas. So if one of you'd like to share your screen and take over, I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I'll be talking for the first part of the presentation to provide a little bit of the background to sort of SEPA's journey in the field of citizen science and air quality and some of the policy background. And then Colin will go into some of the actual data and information that we've gleaned from the project. So we're looking at about 20 to 30 minutes for the total presentation. Colin, if you want to move on. So this is probably around SEPA's 10th year being involved primarily with citizen science and air quality projects. Work started 2013, where we sort of first dipped our toe into the area, and in 2015 we, working with partner organisations, produced an online teaching package, which is still available for use for schools free of charge. Really, we were looking to see how we could communicate wider. SEPA traditionally as a regulatory organisation has a particular skill set, but looking to see how we could move into the field of science communication and move away from that regulatory focus. So the initial steps were looking at this online teaching package to try to foster behaviour change and education in school children. Colin, if you want to move on. In conjunction with that, we also got involved on an ad hoc basis with various science and technology projects and festivals, which we were asked to participate in. So really, SEPA wasn't particularly proactive in going out and seeking the work, but whenever asked to get involved, we would always try to provide input and resource as necessary. Here is a couple of examples of, for example, science festivals and also schools projects which we got involved with in collaboration with people such as the Science Centre, Glasgow City Council. But again, it was very peacefully when occasion arose and people approached us. Colin, if you want to move on again. But from these initial stages, we can really see the benefit of getting more fully involved in this and trying to use both our expertise, but those people with particular skill sets, especially in relation to science communication and education, because it's not something we could ever, informing people about air quality is not something we could ever do purely on our own. We've got a particular focus, and we needed to get involved with these other people. Some of the key benefits which became clear very soon were how we could look at tailoring messages to different audiences. What most importantly probably was how to develop working relationships with each of those partner organizations who brought something new and different to the table to help achieve multiple benefits, maximize value, especially when everybody's resources are limited. It's really trying to pull every string together to try to get the message across as effectively, and ultimately trying to get that behavior change and inform people how they can make decisions which benefit their health, the environment, improve air quality, that kind of thing. Colin, if you could go on. So around the time that we first got involved, the Scottish Government also decided to move into a more strategic approach to tackle clean air and improving air quality, because there had been historic problems which had not been solved over a length of time. It was identified that a new approach needed to be taken, where various stakeholders were brought together. Those people that had the solutions at their fingertips brought around a table, so we could all start pulling together for the common cause. The result of that was the Scottish Government's first Clean Air Strategy, CAFS, which was published in 2015. But again, during that time, our work was still relatively ad hoc from a citizen science and engagement perspective. It was very ad hoc and still on a request basis, and there was no real sort of formulation or coordination of the work we were doing. However, in 2019, that strategy was reviewed independently, and it was identified that a key cornerstone of any strategy moving forward would be to actually embed public engagement and communication within any new strategy. And as a result of that, the new current Clean Air Strategy, which we have imaginatively titled CAFS 2, which was published in 2021, now has a specific chapter on public engagement and behaviour change and specific actions. So really, this has led to this work area now being embedded within the Clean Air Strategy, and any future strategies which are developed will continue to have this strong focus. Colin? The four main actions contained within the current Clean Air Strategy are on this slide here, and really it's if you take them in reverse order, bullet points 3 and 4 are effectively to continue doing the work we're doing in the way we're doing it. However, there's a broader action, which is an overarching action to develop a formal public engagement strategy for air quality. And to do this, the Scottish Government has actually just completed a piece of work with consultants on looking at what air quality means to citizens of Scotland, what some of the levers might be to encourage behaviour change, so we can develop the approaches in future which are specifically tailored to maximise benefit positive behaviour changes. Those actions are short to long term and will run to 2026. Which is the length of the current strategy. However, there will be a review point in there, and the intention is likely to be to have a third clean air strategy running from 2026 onwards. So that that formal engagement strategy will continue to be taken forward and developed on as the strategy develops. Colin. So just to give you an idea of some of the work we're undertaking while that strategy is being developed, and this is really just to give you an idea of the breadth of it, the Learn About Air package is still available and being used either in part or whole by schools. We still work with individual schools on request, conduct monitoring. Colin goes and has classroom and assembly exercises with pupils. And we've been involved in specific local authority projects. So a good example here is the Angus Schools exclusion zones, where we can help Angus Council conduct monitoring to justify the evidence base for putting in place traffic restrictions around schools during drop-off and pick-up times. Close work with the Glasgow Science Centre on developing both static and mobile air quality exhibits, which allow people to consider air quality. Normally, these are placed at science festivals and specific educational events. We've also developed a teaching package with the Glasgow Science Centre called Our Amazing Air, which is designed for primary pupils, but gives them a consideration of air quality, what it means to them, why it's important, but also ties that in with practical exercises, meeting experts and visits to the Science Centre. And then coming on to the project we're going to discuss in detail here, which is the Stirling Rural Villages project. We're working with the University of Stirling and Stirling Council in a consortium to look at raising the issue of rural air pollution, because obviously the main body of air pollution is centered around the urban environment. However, sometimes the rural aspect gets forgotten. Colin? So just a brief bit of background on the project itself. It is part of a wider PhD through Stirling University, and really what we've done is trying to identify potential villages with air pollution problems, then conduct public engagement exercises to start sharing information that we've monitored in the area, get people thinking about what the causes of their local air pollution is and how they contribute to them, but then also to try to get them to talk about some of the solutions which may be available and how they can reduce their individual or combined designed with residents, and they've been also provided with local the final sessions are always a sort of a summary of the learning process that the community has taken on board, and what some of the solutions and behaviour changes people may choose to take forward. Colin. So we're working in Stirlingshire Council, which is a relatively rural local authority, and this map just provides some of the geographical context. You can see the town city of Stirling over to the east. To the west, you have Loch Lomond, so you've got the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park, which forms part of this area. And to the south, you've got the city of Glasgow. So we chose 5 specific villages within the area. You've got Aberfoyle and Fintry, who are both relatively isolated rural villages in primarily agricultural or forestry kind of land, where your prevalent source of heating will be from solid fuel. Traffic is an issue, but relatively minor in comparison to some of the other problems. We then have Thornhill, Kippen and Doon, which are all effectively commuter villages for Stirling, but in an area of high agriculture, off the gas grid again. So solid fuel heating, but also Kippen and Doon are accessed via 2 very busy trunk roads. So passing traffic tends to be a significant issue in both of those. Hey, Colin.
It's not moving. Hold on.
Oh.
There you go.
There we go. So the outline of each exercise which has taken place, so it's run since October 2022, and this slide just shows you the broad format which has taken place. So the monitoring and community engagement takes place for 1 month. Low-cost sensors, traditionally 3 or 4, were placed around points within each village where likely emission profiles of interest would be viewed. The data, we then look at the data. Colin has extracted the interesting data from the larger data sets, which are then presented back in an accessible format to the community, so they can look at the emission patterns, discuss what they think the causes are, what some of the solutions might be. And from each of these individual village exercises, we've modified the process for the next village coming. So if we've identified any improvements which can be made or updates, we've embedded those into the next stage. So it's been a process of continual improvement. So we're actually just finishing off the final monitoring and community engagement part of the project. The next part will be looking at the results of the community engagement and the write-up of the PhD project. After that, we'll take the various learning points and use that to develop SEPA's approach for any kind of similar community engagement moving forward. So Colin, I think that's the end of my part. I'm moving on to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about some of the sensors and in particular the data that's been collected at each of the villages and the interesting aspects that we pulled out for the villagers to have a look at, for the communities to engage with. So we used 2 different types of sensors. We used lamppost-based sensors, which are relatively large. They require solar panels and they can only go in certain locations. So we decided roughly where those locations were in consultation with the local communities. We identified potential hotspot areas, and that's where we installed those sensors. And each, as Graham said, each village went through a 4-week monitoring programme. We also used smaller sensors, purple layers. We have about 21 of them at our disposal, and they were sent out to anybody who requested them within the community, and they could be used exactly where the individuals lived, and it gave them a better coverage of the network. So it did, but it also allowed them a bit of it gave them some ownership of the monitoring network as well. The large sensors were focused on various pollutants from PM to NO2, whereas the small sensors, it's just particulates that they pick up. So they were limited in what they could actually look at. Okay. When we're doing any of the data, it doesn't matter whether it's with the schools or whether it's with the community groups, we don't tend to give them access to the data portals. They don't tend to get access to the raw data, and that's because I don't think many people would understand what the data looks like and what they're actually looking for. So what we tend to do then is we tend to help with looking at particular episodes, pollution events, that sort of thing, and we'll pull the data out so that the workshops, etc., are all focused around specific events that we can identify air quality issues in. And the communities can sometimes then tell us what actually the events were around their area, and you'll see this in a couple of the slides. The one thing we did was that we developed a Stirlingshire Village project page within our SE Web. SE Web's the Scottish Environment website, and it contains a lot of interesting environmental data. But we created a specific Stirlingshire Village page so that local community groups could go and look at their own area, and then they could extract the information that we were giving them at the workshops. So we created a Spotfire tool. Spotfire is our visualization tool for specific data, and it provides them some information around the monitoring locations and the monitoring data that comes out. And this is what you'll see going forward in the next few slides. Okay, I'm going to go through each village, and I'm going to pull out some of the key air quality issues that we identified, and just explain a little bit about what they were. All right. As Graham says, this is Aberfoyle, and it's almost like a dead end road-wise. The road basically turns heading up into the hills. There's no through traffic, so we weren't really looking at transport per se. However, the locals did identify tourism as being one of the issues, but this was conducted during October-November time. So transport wasn't the big issue in Aberfoyle. However, interestingly, Aberfoyle, we were monitoring across some of the other villages at the same time, and Aberfoyle was the only village that had Guy Fawkes activities. So they had a bonfire right in the village green, and as you can see from the data, we picked up that activity very nicely through the PM10 readings that we were getting, and we demonstrated that across in relation to the other villages that we were monitoring at the time, and how they had an increase in background, but they didn't have the same kind of spike that Aberfoyle suffered that particular night because of local activities. So it kind of shows you that if you collect the right data, you can identify really niche little events that happen locally. Doon is an interesting location because Doon has the A84, which is a real commuter belt or trunk road, and it doesn't run right through the village. It runs down the side of the village. So we monitored across the main street of the village, and we also monitored at the junction of the A84, just so that we could look at some traffic data. And we were looking inside the village at the main street because this is where most of the older housing were, and they were completely off grid, lots of solid fuel, that sort of thing. And then we had a monitor down near the school, down at the bottom end of the village, because we were quite interested in looking at school traffic, and we were going to compare the school with another school in the same area, just to have a look at the traffic in that way. So having a look at the actual data within the village itself, it was quite easy to see that as temperatures dropped during the monitoring period, the solid fires were put on, whether they were coal or wood burning stoves. And we could record quite nicely the increase in PM as the temperature started to drop. So as the nighttime came, the PM started to shoot up during the evening when people were all sitting there with their heating on, solid fuel burning. And then during the day, these PMs dropped again, and sometimes we would get the sort of morning peak as that people were getting up and maybe putting the fire on before they went off to work, etc. So it was quite clear that particulates was quite an issue, especially around cold periods. And we also showed them the impact of calm weather as well, and how PM settled around some of the villages. And we got the same level and the same pattern of data across all the villages that we've recorded so far, particularly through solid fuel burning. So I'm only going to show you it for the Doon village as an example, but it was quite similar patterns. And during the workshops, we spoke about the impact of solid fuel burning and how to reduce some of your contributions through what you burn. Okay, the other thing we were interested in was commuter traffic. And like I said, one of the sensors, the west sensor, was literally located at the junction of the main route through the village and out towards Stirlingshire. And we could quite easily see morning and evening peak traffic just purely related to commuter traffic. That same peak traffic wasn't quite as visible in the village itself. We had the evening peaks, but not always the morning peaks. And same happened with some of the other villages as well. We had some village traffic, but not the same way as you would see commuter peaks. So that was quite an interesting observation, and we kind of knew that this would occur as one of the issues. This is Deanston. Deanston sits just outside of Doon, so it's kind of almost located side by side, but Deanston is a village that sits literally on its own. There's no through road. Anything that's gone in there has gone in there for a reason, and that's it. It doesn't have any sources apart from the sort of wood burning and coal fires. There's no main routes through this particular village, and we located the sensor near the primary school, but very interestingly, it was on next to a bus stop, just where the school collection was. So we were keen to look at the traffic related to both the Doon primary and the Deanston primary schools. And we could see quite nicely that in the Doon primary school, we got a morning peak and an afternoon peak where kids were picked up and dropped off. And in the Deanston primary, it was mainly an afternoon peak that we were seeing. And speaking to the schools, we went and did a couple of school visits to both of the schools. And speaking to the schools, it was quite clear that there wasn't a lot of traffic, and most of the kids came from the surrounding village area and walked. And the only traffic was an additional bus at home time. So we looked into that a little bit more detail. And this is looking at the bus in more detail. All right, I'll talk you through this one because this is actually the only complicated graph we have in the whole data set, just because it's very interesting. We've got NO2 spikes and NO spikes that happen throughout the day, and we have a double spike where you can see I've circled red. That double spike was the bus going home at the end of the school, but the other spikes was actually the local bus, and it follows the bus timetable very nicely, which is why I've put these asterisks on, because it follows that bus timetable. So for every time the bus came through the village, our monitor picked up its spike. And you can see it was a real old Euro 3 bus. I think it's what I would class as a stinky bus. And it was picking up quite nicely and quite consistently. Okay, Fintry, we're moving on to Fintry. Fintry sits in a valley between the Campsie Fells, which is a sort of small mountainous range, and the hills heading to Kippen. And it's we were quite interested in that because we have a monitor located in the village itself, a monitor at the school, and a monitor at the sports ground. And the sports ground itself is also a community hub with several football pitches and rugby pitches located to it. We got the usual PM with cold weather, but we also got this very interesting spike on a Saturday, and presented to the community. It was pretty evident that it was actually from traffic at the sports centre. This is the sports centre's monitor, and it was associated with several rugby games that were going on at the same time. And so this is traffic that's related to getting in and out of that particular sports centre. It could be multiple buses, or it could be just a whole range of traffic itself. But we were quite interested just to show how very localised events can create spikes in air pollution. Okay, Thornhill. Thornhill is it's got a through road. The main street's a sort of through road through Thornhill, and so we picked up some traffic data on Thornhill itself, and it was very much commuter-led traffic. Thornhill's almost like a single village, a single street village. It's really, really small, and so this was more traffic running through towards Stirlingshire. It is a bit of a rat run, I think, is what Graham called it the other day. And it's one of those areas where people will take a shortcut in order to miss out some of the more busier roads. So it was interesting to show that we we're identifying these morning and afternoon peaks in commuter traffic right through the village. But we had another event, and this was down near the primary school. And this is a very small road that heads out towards Kippen. And we identified on one particular day, the 7th, a lot of activity around the primary school area in terms of NO2, and then real large spikes in terms of PM10. And that was associated with roadworks that was getting done at the time. The roads were getting stripped back off and relaid, and they were actually working around that particular area on that particular day as they were resurfacing the rest of the road. So again, it was showing that it wasn't always traffic that caused the problems in some of these villages. So it was quite interesting for the community to let us know exactly what days these sort of events fell on. Okay, I'll move on to Graham now to finish off.
Thanks, Colin. It looks like I'll never be able to go back to Thornhill if they find out I called it a rat run. Yeah, so just a couple of summary slides. We recognise SEPA as regulators have got a particular regulatory focus and a particular sort of set of expertise and ways of communicating. This kind of area is not something we're used to, and we don't have the expertise, and that's why we try to get as involved as much with other people who do have that expertise. And so it's constantly a learning process for ourselves. We have a tendency to to talk in a particular way about particular issues in particular language, and that's not always the way it needs to be done. So looking at the work we've been doing over the last 10 years and how we're going to develop our work moving forward once we've got the formal strategy in place, these are just some of the major learning points we've observed, and we're trying to build into any work we do in future, because everything we do is never going to be perfect. There's always an opportunity to improve and make it better. So just to go through a couple of these, and the presentation will be available to yourself, so you can have a look in more detail at anything you're particularly interested in. But behavior change is key, and it may well be that younger generations are more open to that learning process and then the behavior change. And in all cases, try to keep it tailored. Any messages, keep them tailored to the audience that you're talking to, which means keeping it as simple as possible. As Colin has shown, make any information that is relatable as possible too. So actually, the information actually means something to the people you're talking to, and they can actually identify what's happening. The data as well, as Colin has shown, huge data sets are no good. You just need to pick out the particular points of interest to illustrate the point you're trying to make and take people on that particular learning journey. One interesting thing we've found is never make air quality the sole issue. If there are other hooks which can accrue air quality benefits which are related, but for example, if it's active travel, if it's health, if it's things such as anti-idling, always use any particular lever you can find. Talking about a single issue is never particularly good. So trying to tie it into as much as possible, and especially in relation to people's lives and their local environments as well, is really helpful, making the issue of concern something real to people. And I suppose the last point is everyone's under extreme resource restrictions at the moment, and really whatever work we're trying to do, we always try to link in with as many organizations as possible to maximize our resource availability, utilize other people's areas, utilize where other people have got money available or budgets. We're trying to bring all of those together so we can really hit as many policy areas and as many environmental benefits and health benefits as possible. So it's searching as far as you can to try to find appropriate partners to get involved with, because we can't do it all alone and other people can't do it all alone. So it is a real question of pulling everybody together and in the same direction. Colin, I think there's one more slide, and then it's so it's just trying to empower people to make decisions based on learning and information to then achieve the environmental benefits. It's regulation is never going to solve everything, and it really will be that shift in generational and behavioral change which results in ultimately air quality improving both locally and nationally. And the final slide is just our contact details. So if there's any follow-ups, you want to get in touch with us, both happy to receive emails, and so get in touch. So that's the end of the presentation.
Well, thank you both very much. And of course, as you said, the slides will be available on the TAPAS website, so that interested people can go back and look at them. We've got a number of questions in the chat, and I'll go through them. I mean, the initial part was about schools, and the question was, is this focused at primary or secondary schools, or both? And I presume that means some of the learning material that you've produced and so on.
Yeah, most of it is based towards primary school. The learning material that we have online, we do have a secondary school component to it. We have a science module which focuses on experiments within the classroom that have got a air quality theme or are related to air quality, such as distillation or something like that. And then we have the rest of our work is mainly around primary schools. In this particular project, we went out to all the local primary schools, because that's the only schools that are in those villages. And
is that material that you produce, is that publicly available, or is it?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a question from Sarah Robertson. What sort of evaluation are you doing to assess sustainable behavioral change, as the projects are relatively short? Also, were they all conducted at the same time of the year, or did you take weather into account?
No, they're not all conducted at the same time of year. It's a PhD student who was running each of the village sessions, so our time's limited, and then we were moving the monitors around to help with the monitoring program. So again, time and resources limited.
Yeah.
She does 3 workshops, and in the final workshop, that's where she looks to evaluate how the behaviours might change within the village. Workshop 2 is normally when she presents some of the data.
Right. Okay, from Carolyn Moore. How much can the Scottish Government CAF2 do about English government actions, e.g. coal mines, e.g. subsidising big oil, which surely must have some impact on Scotland?
You want me to take that one, Colin? I'm not sure how much influence it can actually have. Air pollution, air quality is an issue wholly devolved to the Scottish Parliament, and Scottish Government. So really our air quality strategy is Scotland specific. We are still covered by the UK air quality strategy, or we were until a couple of weeks ago, when it's now been reviewed by each of the UK government and devolved administrations. So there will be discussions taking place, but ultimately air quality has diverged between each of the 4 nations within the UK to take their own sort of tailored approach to local problems. The transboundary issue is always going to be a problem. So there is still UK work on air pollution through things such as the national emission ceilings regulations and the Gothenburg Protocol requirements. But yeah, on a day-to-day basis, there's possibly not too much influence that we can have.
Yeah, I can understand that. Okay, got a couple more some more questions. So Douglas Booker asks, how much concern about indoor air quality did you encounter when you were working with these village communities?
So for this particular project, or this particular element of Amy's PhD, it was more concerned with outdoor pollution, but some of Amy's work has been focusing on indoor as well. But SEPA, as an agency, we don't normally get involved with indoor air quality issues. But like I say, SEPA, Amy's work has involved working with asthma sufferers on indoor and outdoor pollution.
Yeah, can I just jump in here, Colin, as well? The CAFS2 strategy has some actions in relation to health and indoor air quality, but it's really, these are longer term actions, and it's really at the preliminary stage of evidence gathering and assessing the current state of particular indoor air quality issues in Scotland. So it's something that is definitely going to be considered for the future, but it's at a in comparison to outdoor air quality, it's at a relatively early stage at the moment.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the issues that TAPAS faces is really the interaction between indoors and outdoors, and of course it's a complicated business because different sources have different impacts. So indoor sources are relieved by ventilation, but which sometimes brings in stuff from outside and vice versa. So fascinating area, which is one of the things that keeps us all occupied in many ways. A couple of questions related to behavior change. So I'll try and summarize them. One is, how much do you think people changed their behavior? And of course, there are obviously limitations to that. They presume still have to take the bus or use their solid fuel burners. And so, perhaps you'd like to comment on, what sort of agency do you think people have, and how keen are they to make changes, or is that a very difficult area, in fact?
I think, I'm going to go by some of the school work first. I think when we do some of the school work, it's really difficult for us to go back in after a period of time to see if behavioural change has actually occurred. So we intend to work with Cycling Scotland and Living Streets, who that's their area of expertise, is to try and push that behavioural change over a longer term. So we tend to go in, identify what the issues are, and highlight how behaviours could change, and then Living Streets and Cycling Scotland tend to do longer term actions that help deliver that area of work. Within this particular project, when we were doing the workshops, it was things about what you're burning on your fire, etc., what kind of wood you were using, whether it was dried and that sort of thing. We realised that people are off the grid, and there's no alternative fuel sources. It's just how you then utilise that fuel source, which is what we were pushing.
Yeah, I think there was also, it was recognised as well, some of the external pressures like cost of living and energy pricing at the moment, as well as is severely limiting people's ability to change behaviours in some circumstances. And that there is anecdotal evidence of the amount of forest wood burning increasing with the cost of energy. And that it's trying to square those circles, and it's fully understood that, as Colin says, at least two of these villages will never be on a gas grid, or it'll probably always be predominantly solid fuel burning of some variety. It's then trying to get them to the residents to either use the cleanest appliance or the cleanest fuel possible and operate it in the way that maximizes reduces the potential for air pollution.
Yeah, thank you. And a final question, I think, which is from Sarah Robertson, who asked whether inequality was considered. In other words, or did you look at the demographics of those who attended the community events? So I guess that, the question is who's concerned and who's not, I suppose, about these issues.
I think because of the size of the village, there's not it's not a great big difference in demographics across the area. I would imagine Amy's probably taken it in as part of her initial studies, but it's certainly not something that we considered in this particular project because of the size of the villages. They were so small.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I think that brings to the end of the questions in the chat. I mean, one of the things that struck me about this is it's very rare, I think, to have information about air quality in rural communities. We all seem to be very obsessed by what happens in cities, obviously because they're perhaps more highly polluted and lots of people live in them. But it's very interesting to get data from more rural places. And I just wondered, you didn't seem to see any impact of agriculture. Is that fair, or does it not have any impact in these places?
Some of it will be related to the time of year that we've done the work.
Yeah.
So it has, I mean, we have identified cross-boundary issues before as well in other rural work that we've done.
Right.
I think just to add on that, the one thing we have picked up on occasions, both through this and the previous exercises, is transboundary pollution episodes. So things like Saharan dust, spreading of fertilizers in Eastern Europe, burning of fuels in Eastern Europe. As Colin says, it's the weather conditions from October until March in Scotland are unconducive to doing very much, let alone agriculture.
Yeah, no, it's true. Okay, well, thank you very much, both of you. On behalf of everybody, I'd like to do that. Just to say, as this is the first of the current series of seminars. The next week's seminar will also be associated with Scottish Environmental Protection Agency. It'll be by Fiona Davies and Susa Meckelham from the Glasgow Science Centre, talking on the Learning Lab, Our Amazing Air. So it's a very good segue from this current presentation into the talk next week. Kat's also put into the chat the link to our website, at which you can look at the slides, and also a link to how you might join our network if you're not already involved and don't receive our newsletter, etc. And with that, I'd just like to again thank the speakers, thank all of you for coming along and spending this hour with us. And I look forward to seeing you all next week at the next talk. So thanks very much. Bye-bye.